So, a question I often get is, how do I overcome my terrible childhood and have a healthy, happy relationship with a romantic partner as an adult? I get this in particular from kids of single moms, so I don't know if I can give you what you need, but I can certainly give you what worked for me. So, the first ingredient, of course, is to fully accept without reservation just how terrible your childhood was. Your brain is always poised to photocopy. Are we stuck inside a terrible tribal-based matrix that we can't escape? Are we just doing the same thing again? Because remember, you're here because people got to have sex and reproduce. In other words, you're here and made it to adulthood because a man found a woman willing to accept his sperm and raise his children. And that's the purpose of life, and that's the reality and the reason as to why we're here. And there's no other reality and reason as to why we're here. So your genes are constantly seeking for a willing egg holder, right? A smiling egg cup is your pointy bit's destination. And this is, I'm just talking for the men here. We'll talk a little bit about the ladies in a sec. But so you're driven psychologically and emotionally and biologically to do that which is necessary to gain access to ovaries and to a willing mother for your offspring. And so if you had a terrible childhood, then it means that bad women give eggs to bad men, right? That's what your biology interprets, right? So if you had a crappy childhood, if your mom was violent or neglectful or abusive in other ways or just horrible human being in general, then your balls are like, oh, okay, so it's like horrible woman fest. Reproduce the mindset, because the mindset is why they're there. The mindset is why the genes got to be reproduced. So the trying to figure out, for men, trying to figure out what is the kind of woman who will give you the eggs that you need to reproduce, right? Well, what kind of women are out there? Who are they giving their eggs to? That's very foundational to your sexual success as a human being. So, given all of that, I think it's fairly easy to understand that without intervention, you are going to grow into the type of man that your father was, right? Because your father was the guy who successfully got a woman impregnated, and that's all that your balls want to do. So that's really important to understand. That's sort of the basic foundation of the reasons for psychological reproduction of early childhood trauma. So the first thing that you need to tell your body, or that you need to tell your unconscious, is that there are choices. This is not an absolute. So in a tribe of 70 people or 50 people or 100 people, you really don't have choice. Right? You simply don't have choice. And so your brain is like, are we in a tribe or are we in a city? Are we in the country or are we in the city? In the country, there's precious little choice. In a tribe, there's precious little choice. Frankly, none. But if you're in a city, then you can change your social circles. You can change your social circles. Isn't that cool? And so, remember, your psychology, your biology is not aiming for happiness. Philosophy will aim you at happiness, but biology and base psychology, the reptile part of your brain, the fucking breed part of your brain, is not aiming you at happiness. Doesn't really care if you're happy. It cares that the sperm hits the egg at the right angle. Frankly, it's all it cares about. Reproduction, reproduction, reproduction. You don't have a sex drive because your sex drive will make you happy. I think there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of men around the world and women who will say that their sex drive has made them enormously unhappy. So biology is not aiming you at happiness, but eggs and sperm. And philosophy will aim you at happiness. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say, how my mother was not an absolute. In other words, you need to inject the free will aspect into your mother's life. I mean, you can create some sort of artificial division, but that's pretty exhausting and debilitating in the long run. Holding two opposing thoughts in your mind is extremely dangerous and damaging to your energy, to your self-respect, to your integrity, to your morality, because you're always keeping fire and ice at bay in your brain, and they're constantly trying to mate with each other, and you're constantly pushing them back, and you can't rest, and you can't relax, and there's this constant battle. If you set up parents are human beings. I am human being. Parents have no free will. I have free will. We're both human beings. So human beings both have free will and have the opposite of free will. I mean, that's just exhausting, and I would not recommend that path at all. So the first thing you need to recognize is that your parents had choice and you had choice. Now, this is true of everyone who's alive now. I mean, yes, I will fully grant in the Stone Age, people frankly didn't really have choice. They couldn't move to any place more sensible. They couldn't move to any place more rational. There's just no particular possible or even remotely possible way of even trying to deal with that situation. But in the 20th century, there was mobility, there were choices, there was philosophy, there was self-knowledge, there was psychology, psychiatry, in its original form, sort of the pursuit of self-knowledge, this, that, and the other. So all of that was available to people, even in the country. They could move to the city, and people did, right? I mean, if there was a gold rush, where did people go? When people went to the gold rush, they hit it hard. People moved countries. All the people in the 18th and 19th centuries, they came to America. And why did they come to America? To pursue a better life. So people were able to cross entire oceans on rickety boats and all this, that, and the other, able to get all of that stuff done so that they could live a better life. And so the idea that people can't move to be with healthier people or look for healthier situations, well, what can I tell you? It's hard for people to say, I didn't have a choice. Of course they did. Of course they did. So, your parents had a choice. Your single mother had a choice. She could have been a better person. She could have pursued self-knowledge. She could have done the right thing. Or she at least could have recoiled from doing the wrong thing. I know my mother, at points in my childhood, recoiled from the abuse that she was pouring upon myself. I assume my brother as well, though I can only speak for myself. I remember the times of regret, the times of, never openly, but I could see it in her eyes that she was pretty horrified at what she was doing, and then she just slipped right back into doing the crappy thing. The other test, of course, for whether somebody possesses free will is, do they punish you for the effects of your choices as a child, right? So if your mom hit you for doing the wrong thing, then she was saying, you are morally responsible for your choices, you're doing this and you must be punished. All of society punishes children for their choices. So yeah, the first thing that you recognize is that your parents had choices, and they chose badly. And they willed what happened to you as a child. They willed what happened to you as a child. There's that old saying, live by the sword, die by the sword. Yeah. Inflict free will, have free will inflicted on you. Hit a child for his choice or her choice to misbehave, then you cannot claim that you were doing the best you could with the knowledge that you had, and you didn't really have a choice, and you'd had a bad childhood and so on. Well, guess what? The child you're punishing is having a shitty childhood, and that doesn't seem to give you much capacity to excuse the child, now does it? So you can't claim excuses for what you did when you were 30 when you're not willing to extend those same excuses for what a child does when he's 3 goddamn years old. That is pathetic. It's inevitable in a weird kind of way, but it's absolutely pathetic. So, to recognize that your parents had choices and chose to act the way that they did, and chose to maintain acting the way that they did, is important to understand. If you have smoked enough cigarettes, you can't win a marathon. Right? So you don't have the choice to win the marathon after you've smoked X number of cigarettes. And yet, your choice to smoke those cigarettes was your choice to smoke those cigarettes. Right? So if you end up with diminished choice later on as a result of prior choice, does not excuse anything. A man who's 300 pounds cannot win a marathon. I get that. I would not say that he has that choice. But he does not have that choice because he ate too much food and did not exercise previously, which is deep down to say that he did not pursue his self-knowledge with regards to his trauma, which is incredibly well known. I mean, there's nobody around who's had access to a television or a bookstore or a library who has no idea that self-knowledge is important. I mean, the number one show on daytime TV for like years is Dr. Phil. And Oprah talks about it all the time, and it's a self-help section in bookstores is huge, and Deepak Chopra and Chiclet Teeth Banana Hands Tony Robbins also have these shows, and it's sold out. Anyway, so the idea that self-knowledge is important plays a role. The past plays a role in the future. It's been known for thousands of years, but it's certainly entered popular culture for probably 120 or 130 years. So they had choice. And once someone has choice and acts badly in a way that harms you, then you get to be angry. In fact, you will be angry. I mean, that's virtually a guarantee. You will be angry. Of course you will be. If someone consciously acts in a manner that harms you permanently, and don't misunderstand, don't underplay, when you have a bad childhood, you are permanently harmed. Doesn't mean that you're permanently broken, but you are permanently harmed. You are still permanently harmed because you had to spend all that time and energy fixing yourself rather than doing something else. I mean, that pisses me off. You know, if somebody had injected you with a drug that raised enormously your risk of cancer, if somebody had injected you with that kind of drug, you would actually be justified. Oh, they were waving that kind of drug right? You would be justified in shooting them in self-defense. If somebody was going to inject you with that kind of drug, you would be entirely justified shooting them in self-defense in order to save yourself from such a fate, right? So yes, it is a murderous level of rage when you have been attacked consistently as a child. You will end up with a murderous level of rage. And anyone who has not experienced that or denies it is, just not prepared yet, not ready for the reality of what has been done to them. So when you get angry, then you are signaling responsibility on the part of another. Right? Exasperated or frustrated is more to do with this person did a bad thing by accident. Right? So if my child hands her helium balloon to another child who accidentally lets it go, then I'm sort of frustrated and exasperated, but I'm not really angry. I'm not angry at all, actually. On the other hand, if the child who has my daughter's balloon smiles in a malicious manner and consciously opens his hand to let go of the balloon, then I'm going to be angry. Because it's accident versus choice. So once you grant choice to your abusers, you reclaim choice for yourself. And the price of choice is rage. The price of choice is rage. Because the price of choice is the acceptance of and rational assignation of moral responsibility, right, to yourself and to others. And with moral responsibility with choice comes moral responsibility, which comes evil for harm. And rage is our response to evil. And murderous rage is our response to life-threatening evil. Right? If some animal is trying to attack you, you will feel rage to the point where you will kill the animal rather than let it harm you. I mean, we do that for the most part with mosquitoes, and all they're threatening to do is take a bit of blood and give us a minor itch. But we'll often slap them, right? So rage is the healthy response to evil, to life-threatening evil, and significant child abuse is a life-threatening evil, right? It permanently harms you physically, raises cortisol levels, raises stress levels, permanently changes the brain, and causes nervous system realignments, and creates hugely elevated chances of becoming an abuser. And I mean, just it's a life-threatening experience, even if you don't become suicidal, or if you don't become addicted to something dangerous, whether it's fast cars or heroin or sex or gambling, something that's, could get you killed, or just become a smoker, right? I mean, people who've gone through a lot of child abuse have a 20 years less life expectancy. So, murderous rage is what you're going to feel at having been so harmed by people making choices. Right? Right. If somebody is going to inject your child with a life-threatening disease, you have the right to shoot them dead. And I would sort of question people who didn't do that, I guess you could say. So, or, if that was their only choice. I certainly would. Because I don't have the right to let somebody harm my child in that manner. So, rage is the recognition of choice and moral responsibility, and rage is to say, I reject it, I reject it, I reject it. And you need to reject it at such a fundamental level that your brain begins to reorganize at the unconscious level. So forgiveness is just another abuse mechanism that is eminently encouraged by people who are abusers or those who serve the needs of abusers by blaming the victims. Forgiveness is a way of blaming the victim for not being over your abuse, right? And it's usually only applied to children. All right. We don't say to victims of the Holocaust that they should give up trying to catch Nazi war criminals or get their money back from Swiss banks and so on. We don't tell them to forgive and forget. We don't tell rapists that they need to forgive their rape victims, that they need to forgive their rapists and so on. It's children that this is always applied to. So this is why I just have such a hate-on for what is talked about as forgiveness. If forgiveness is such a fucking virtue, then why do we not focus on having parents forgive their children rather than punish them? Because it's... right, children have no power, and we side with the powerful and hold the victims down while they can kick and beat and scold them and all that, right? That's natural. Natural now. It's not human nature. It's just natural as it stands. So, yeah, your parents had a choice. They're responsible for their choices. And when you fully accept that, that is going to make you very angry. And that anger is incredibly healthy, but incredibly dangerous. And you will be criticized for that anger from every cowardly and broken human being on the planet. Because anger threatens the cycle of abuse, which so many people are participating in, right? Anger breaks the cycle of abuse. Just as I've said before, if you want your immune system to get angry at a disease, to kill it, well, in the same way, you want to get angry, though not kill, right? You want to get angry at your abusers. And anger, which we're always told to not have, right? I mean, slaves can't be angry because the anger of the slaves ends enslavement. So, of course you'll be told to don't get angry, for heaven's sakes. How could you possibly think about getting angry? You need to forgive. You need to forget. You need to move on. It's just poisoning you. It's not changing the other person. Well, of course, the whole anger, yeah, I mean, what the hell does anger have to do with changing the other person? I mean, if a lion is attacking you and your fight-or-flight mechanism kicks in, is that because you want the lion to turn into a gazelle? Of course not. Anger is simply recognition of harm. So no, the idea that you get angry so that you can change someone, of course. I mean, why would you want to stay around an unrepentant abuser. That's just continuing the cycle. You can choose to expose yourself to toxins, but I don't really think that you have an easily defensible right to expose your children to toxins. And unrepentant abusers are toxic to both your children and to you. So that's my argument. I hope it makes sense. I fully understand that's not exactly a ABC sequence of action, and I'm sorry for that. That is the path. Those are not the steps, right? And basically it's a GPS destination with a couple of waypoints, but not exact driving directions, because that's not something which I can really talk about in general, because it tends to be rather specific to each individual. But yeah, I mean, the Sith are right. Embrace your anger. Turn to the dark side. That's where the light is, right? You kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight, as the singer once said. And you really need to, I say, embrace and accept your anger at evil, right? Otherwise, you'll end up taking out your anger on the good or the innocent, as your parents did. And you don't want that. You don't want that. That becomes very, very hard to recover from. Thanks again, fdrurl.com/donate. Love it if you would help out. Take care.
Alright, so this is going to be a summary of the video on how to overcome your history. So, your brain is always poised to photocopy, and you are here because your parents reproduced and made it to adulthood. But the critical question is, what conditions set things in motion? You are driven to do what is necessary to attain access to ovaries, that's obvious. What is overlooked is the particular emotional and psychic precedent which determines the quality of the relationship. So, because the brain is a guessing machine, and because it likes to operate on approximations, we are driven to recreate the mental characteristics which evidently worked. What I mean by that is, the mindset which resulted in our creation is then adopted as our own strategy. This is demonstrably true, actually. I'm reading a book on attachment during infancy, and there were these long intergenerational studies on children, and the research found that the particular attachment pattern of the parent, and often the grandparent, was then adopted by the child. I will have to do a video on this later, because this is a very expansive topic. Please keep an eye out for it, like in the future. So, think about that. The attachment pattern of the grandparent can be expected to be transmitted a few generations down the line. So, the next point is biology is not geared towards sustainable happiness. It is philosophy that is going to help you with sustainable happiness. But the reptile part of the brain does not really care about your happiness. It only cares about your sex drive. There are studies out there which indicate that casual sex is linked to depression, and that sex between couples in a sustainable relationship is rated as the best type of sex. Sex isn't necessarily indicative of sustainable happiness. Then the next point in the video, because he talks a lot, right? And so I'm trying to break this down. He eventually makes it to the next point, making excuses by saying I was doing the best that I could with the knowledge that I had at the time, as a justification for inflicting trauma on a child is not good enough. If the trauma was inflicted on a child because the child was misbehaving, then you could say that the child was doing the best with the knowledge that they had. Obviously, that did not spare them from moral condemnation. If your choices in the present resulted in diminished capacity, in a diminished capacity to make choices later on in the future, for example, like getting blackout drunk and committing a crime, your ability for self-control was hindered, right? But ultimately, you made the choice to become irresponsibly drunk in the first place. If someone has moral agency, and they had alternatives, but ultimately things narrowed down to you being harmed, they are objectionable. With choice comes moral responsibility, and anger is the appropriate response to evil, and violent rage is a natural reaction when it comes to harmful evil. The effects of childhood trauma are compounded by the fragility of the psyche during childhood. Significant child abuse is a life-threatening evil, so naturally there's going to be a lot of anger within us. I was reading a book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, and the author helps with children. He helps children with psychological and emotional issues. He says that the younger the child, the less they will be able to conceptualize their trauma, and therefore they will be less able to metabolize, so to speak, the emotional turmoil. So there's this correlation between conceptualization, right? The ability to actually fully grasp what is happening, and the ability to metabolize trauma, so to speak. So therefore, it is important to become more aware of the context surrounding the source of your troubles and the mindset, and the mindset behind them. Kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight, as they say.